Hello, you're listening to Hella Weights, the home of heavy music and heavy weights. We're back. We've been away now for a few weeks. No, 3 weeks. What's it been? We've had a bit of time off and we're ready to get back to it. So we're going to be here with you throughout the winter, back into spring, summer 2020. First of all, this episode, we've got no guests today. So what we're going to do is talk through a few different subjects. I want to talk about cutting. I want to talk about how that goes. I want to talk about getting through the winter, getting over Christmas, getting your head down and making things happen. And I'm going to talk about some strategies that have been working for me when it comes to getting into the gym and lifting on those cold, dark nights. So without much further ado, welcome to the show. Okay, it is winter time. We're now firmly in the winter. The winter lasts now until March, I think, certainly in the UK. If you're listening abroad, your dates may vary, but it's certainly winter here in the UK. We haven't had any snow yet, but we've had a bit of ice, and it's certainly now down in the single digits when it comes to temperature. And what does that mean for us? What does that mean for our workouts? Well, it means that British summertime is over, so we have dark nights. It gets darker a lot earlier now. We can expect it to sort of be dark from about 5 p.m. onwards. And dark mornings as well, so you can expect to wake up, if you're waking up at 5, 6 a.m. as I am, it's dark until about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, and then it gets dark about 12 hours later. So if you're a morning gym goer or an evening gym goer, it means you're going to the gym in the dark, which isn't, shouldn't change that much, but there is a slight psychological thing that goes on there. If you woke up to bright sunshine around 5, 6 a.m., personally, I find that slightly easier to get going when it's nice and bright out on those mornings, but when you get up and it's still dark, then obviously that's not as easy. So you have to prepare for that. You have to get used to that. You have to get used to the fact that, you're going to be getting up and going to bed when it's dark. There is some good aspects to it. You can get an earlier night. Sometimes in the summer, I used to find it really hard to get to sleep around 7, 8 p.m. because it was bright sunshine outside and it didn't really get dark until about 9, half 9 p.m. And then it takes you an extra hour to wind down, so really it was hard to get to sleep until about 10. And then it'd be bright nice and early, so you'd wake up, nice and early. So summer can tend to eat into your sleep. You can sometimes get a bit more sleep in the winter. The tendency is to want to stay in bed because it's also cold outside. So there's that urge to fight, but there are upsides to it as well. The cold weather is another thing we've got to think about. So we have to dress slightly smarter. It's hoodie season for the gym. If you go to these sort of warehouse big box gyms or gyms without air conditioning, a lot of old school bodybuilding gyms, they're just rooms, right? So you are going to have to keep yourself nice and warm in there, at least until your workout really gets going. So, you can wear a couple of layers, you can wear a hoodie and really get going, and then, take bits and pieces off as you work out. Keep those muscles nice and warm, stay warm throughout your workout. You'll prevent strain, you prevent tears and things like that in your muscle fibers, and you'll just feel a lot better throughout the entire workout. It does mean that working out in cold weather feels really good because you will find that if you are working out regularly and you're getting, good quality exercise and your diet is on point, then you're going to notice that you have a slightly faster metabolism than other people. Your metabolism is burning, hotter and better, which means that you will be just warmer when other people are really cold in this season. So that's something to, take notice of and to appreciate, that you're not going to feel the cold as much as people who aren't exercising and eating well. On the subject of food, we're coming up to some big festive events. In America, you're going to celebrate Thanksgiving soon, I believe. And in the UK and rest of Europe, we are going to celebrate Christmas. and those events are correlated with excessive food, excessive intake. It's a feast event, right? So Thanksgiving, you have your Thanksgiving dinner. Christmas is a Christmas dinner is a similar event, but all through the season there are temptations to treat yourself and to indulge in sweet, sugary, fatty foods that you wouldn't normally eat regularly all year round. And so considering those foods is a wise thing to do. I'm not saying don't eat them. If it's important to you to eat them, then go ahead and do that. But it's also important to acknowledge that just because they're there doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you to eat them. So if you're just idly tucking into cheap chocolate for breakfast, that isn't necessarily the same as having dessert with your family on Christmas Day. They're different things. So you can rein it in a bit when it's not appropriate, and that way you can enjoy the bits when it is appropriate all the more. I personally am dieting over winter and Christmas. I quite like dieting in these seasons because I find that it helps me focus on the sort of goals that I'm still trying to achieve. I'm not a big Christmas guy, and therefore I don't really miss the celebration sort of thing. I'm not a Christian. I'm not religious. I don't particularly like the sort of gift buying, gift giving, culture-y side of it either. So I don't really get a lot out of it, but I appreciate a lot of people do, and therefore they may, choose to indulge in those sorts of things. What else does it mean for us? It means that the weather is going to be progressively deteriorating. So we can expect mornings to run on a bit when we have to scrape ice off the car, for example, just to scrape ice off the windscreen and things like that. That's one thing, but then there's also lots and lots of other things. So you can expect over time ice, snow, slush, sometimes floods that follow periods of heavy snowfall, things like that. The weather is a thing you have to sort of be constantly vigilant on, whereas in the summer you can sort of forget about it a bit because a bit of rain is fine. So how does that impact your health? It's going to mean that sometimes getting to the gym is hard or impossible, and that's okay. That's fine. Just make sure that you do the best you can, work around it, get in when you can. If you've got a home gym, even better. You're not going to have those problems. If you've got the ability to work out at home, then again, that is going to insulate you somewhat from some of those issues. I don't have a lot. I've got a few dumbbells here that would suit. If I really had to, I could get a decent workout with them. But they're no real substitute for a proper gym. So yeah, just consider the weather, consider what that means, and how that might or might not impact your training. We're also going to be hit by seasonal opening hours, so you may find that your gym is closed over some of the Christmas and New Year period. I'm quite lucky in the sense that the gym that I'm most likely to go to is only really closed on Christmas Day, and then every other day that would normally have impacted opening hours just has slightly reduced hours, but I can still get there. I can still go work out, which is great. That may vary for you, so obviously, check with your gym and see what's going on, and work and plan your workouts around that. What else do we have to consider for fitness? You've got about a month left, maybe a month and a few days, for those annual goals that you're trying to reach. If you are not far from your annual goal, I would hope you've either achieved it already or you are close to achieving it. If you're not that far off, now might be a really good time to think about pushing extra hard, doubling down and getting as close to it as you can. If you could smash it in the last month, amazing. If you can get really close and only just get it in January, February next year, that's okay. That's cool. You did it. That's what's important. But you didn't fail. You know, that may have been your yearly goal, and you did it. So well done. It's important to reflect on the progress you've made. I'm really proud of the progress I've made this year. I set myself a series of annual goals at the beginning of the year. I've talked about them before in this podcast, things like the 200 kilogram deadlift, the 100 kilogram bench press, the 100 kilogram overhead press, and the 150 kilogram squat. I've talked about those goals that I have on here a few times, and you've heard me talk about when I've hit those individually in different sessions. So what I often found was that I would get a 200 deadlift in one session, but maybe wouldn't get the 150 squat in the same session. So I've had to adjust my goals throughout the year. Not because I wasn't going to hit them, but because it was likely I was going to hit them early, and therefore had to give myself a bit more of a challenge. So one goal that I did have for myself was that I would hit those annual lifts in the same session. And I'm pleased to say that I did that earlier this week. So I pulled a 200 kilogram deadlift. I did a 150 squat. I did a Viking press. And so you might have seen a Viking press. You may have seen it in strongman competitions. It is a overhead press, like a push press type thing. But it's a machine, and it's essentially, it takes the balance out of the equation, so you can focus on raw pushing power. And I did a 125 kilogram overhead press, and that was stunning. Really pleased with that. So yeah, smashed my goals in a single session, which is great news. I'm cutting at the moment as well, so my energy's down, but it's great to know that the strength is still there. Even though that the calories are not. So that's been really positive. But you've got a limited amount of time left. I'm not slowing down now. I know I've hit the goals that I had for this year, but I'm already thinking about 2020 and what I want to achieve next year. There's going to be next year, I think, is going to be about a few different things for me. I'm going to have some composition goals early on in the year, which is about dropping body fat and maintaining muscle. And then later on in the year, there'll be a few bulking phases and things like that, probably, just to get those numbers up on the strength training. I don't intend to slow down on those things. So yeah, on to 2020, a healthier year, a much stronger year for me. I'm pleased with what I've achieved so far, and I'm only planning on building on it, which is great. I'd love to hear what you're planning on achieving in 2020. If you're just starting out, if you just want to get fitter, want to get trimmer, want to get more muscular, want to get healthier, want more air in your day-to-day life, you don't want to ache, you want to get better sleep, you want to have better sex, all of those things, if those are your goals for next year and you're just starting out, that's fine. It's okay to start now. It doesn't matter if you're 18 or 48 or 58 or 68, you can start and improve your quality of life. So you should think about doing that. That's that's really important to do. Not everyone has to go to the gym, but obviously that is what my passion is. I really like building strength. That's probably the best way to do it, and that's really what this podcast is about. So if you want to get in, you want to lift weights and get strong, then we would love to help you with that. We've got a really supportive community on Facebook, the Hella Weights community, where we all get together and we talk about all those different issues. So yeah, join the community and be a part of something that's really cool. Tell me what your goals are for next year. I'd love to hear them. We want to also, spoke a bit earlier about getting better sleep over the winter. If your sleep is disrupted, or you're not getting enough, or the quality of sleep you're not getting is really poor, then now is the time to get your sleep in check. It's probably going to be easier when the weather is colder and darker than it is at any other time of year. Some really good sleep hygiene factors to get in. If you search on a search engine for sleep hygiene, you will find lots of tips that can help you with that. Just a few that spring to mind immediately are things like keeping your devices out of the bedroom. That's really tough, I know, because a lot of people like to lay in bed and do things on their phone or listen to audiobooks and things like that, but it really is better to leave that behind. Get an alarm clock and leave the phone downstairs. That sort of stuff will help you over time. What else? A cooler room generally tends to be easier to sleep in for most people. If your bedroom is not a place for like leisure, if that makes sense, like if you make it a place for sort of sleeping and that's about it, then you're going to get better quality sleep. So try not to go there to eat, try not to go there to read, try not to watch television, all that sort of stuff. That tends to damage it. It's okay to read in bed, if you've got one of the things I have, which is really helpful. I've got one of those Lumi, I think is the brand, sun lamps. So it's an alarm clock, but it's not an audio alarm clock, it's a visual alarm clock. So it progressively simulates a sunrise in the morning, which wakes you up much more gradually, and therefore less. You're likely to be less groggy and feel better when you wake up. You're likely to feel a lot better. So it has worked for me. I'm really pleased with it. Actually, I've had it for a year and a bit now, and my sleep quality has drastically improved since getting it. It's got a sunset feature where you can set like a wind down period to go to sleep in. And you can set like half an hour, 45 minutes or an hour. I generally set an hour wind down, nice slow wind down. And it sets itself up. So you press the wind down button and it goes to the bright sunrise setting. And then it gradually gets dimmer over time to like simulate a sunset. So what I normally do, my bedtime routine, is just before bed, I put all my devices on charge downstairs. I take some melatonin, which I found has really helped me get better quality sleep. And I also take some 5-HTP, which is a supplement which it eventually turns into melatonin or serotonin in the body. So I take those two things, and then I head up to bed. And I lay in bed, I set my timer for the 1 hour. I make sure the alarm's ready on for the morning. Press the timer to start the sundown, and then I start reading. And I read until it gets too dark to read. Then I put the book down, and I go to sleep. And that's been a really effective sleep routine for me. And I get a few things out of it. Firstly, I get to really relax. I've also got a good 45 minutes every night of guaranteed reading time to really chill out and settle my brain. And then that time helps me whiz through books as well. So I wanted to do more reading this year, improve my vocabulary and stuff like that. And one of the ways I've managed to do that is by getting reading in before bed. And I find that really, really relaxing, and it gets me to sleep. And then I get fairly good quality sleep, I think. And then particularly if I take the melatonin, I get fantastic quality sleep. And then I wake up around 5:30 if it's a weekday, and go about my business. So you can do that too. You can try some of those things for yourself and see if they help you sleep. It's also, it's a period of time to think about whether you want to start dieting. A lot of people start dieting in the new year because that's when sort of commercial interests throw their weight behind it. You'll probably start noticing weight loss supplements and Slim Fast and Weight Watchers and fitness videos and all sorts of things like that in the new year. We'll start advertising. You'll probably also notice that TV channels like the the BBC and ITV and some of the satellite channels, or digital channels rather, will start putting shows on like how to lose weight fast, or how to lose weight on a budget, or which diet is for me, and all that sort of stuff. There's all those sort of light entertainment programs that then start showing at the beginning of the year. Sometimes they can be motivating, sometimes demotivating. Sometimes the quality of information isn't great. All you really need to do is make sure that your diet is giving you, good nutrition, and you're not eating too much in terms of caloric intake. Trying to make sure you're getting great quality protein, great quality carbs, good quality fat, in decent enough proportions, and you're also helping your health by exercising in some way. Doing those two things together will solve most of those problems. But you've seen the diet industry and the workout and exercise industry. You can go as deep as you want with information, because it's such a big industry that there's so much of it out there. You can lose your mind over it. If it helps you focus and it helps you stay on track, great, cool. I'm up for it. If it doesn't and you don't need it, don't waste your time with it. Focus on the things that do help you. What else? What else do we need to think about? Because it's winter. It's winter time. Off of the sort of fitness aspect to the other side of this podcast, there's no new music really coming out now until about late January, because record companies, they don't, particularly heavy music, doesn't tend to do a lot of releases trying to get sales for Christmas generally, unless it's specifically a Christmas album. And if they were going to do something like that, they sort of release that early November to try and make sure the distribution is there. So what generally starts to happen, people don't release new music, new albums and stuff now in the last sort of couple of months of the year, because if they do, it's too late to generally get into people's end of the year lists, unless it's really exceptional. And also, your album tends to be easily forgotten, because everyone's sort of wrapping up their year talking about the things they really loved, and your album came out too late to be included in those lists. And then when they come and look at next year's material, what generally happens is the best of next year won't include November and December of the year before, and so you just sort of get forgotten. So what happens is, if you've finished an album and you've got it recorded, what the record company will generally do is hold on to it until the following year, so they can release it then, and it's just much more likely to sell more copies, get heard by more people, support a tour, all of the things that albums should really be doing. What that means for fans of music is that it's pretty much done now for this year until next year. So now is the time to start thinking about your end of year list. It's also an interesting situation because it's 1999. No, fucking hell, that's how old I am. It's 2019 and the decade is almost over. So it's time to start thinking about your album of the decade, which leaves you a phenomenal amount of choice. So the last 10 years of music have given us fantastic albums. I'm not going to name them. I will be releasing a best of the decade list. I generally do a best of the year. I think a best of the decade list will be a lot of fun. So I'll be releasing one of those as well. But yeah, now is the time to start thinking about those. And the good thing about thinking about the best of the year and the best of the decade is revisiting those albums. So you can now start re-listening to all of those things while trying to think about how important they are to you while you're working out, which is really cool. So if you're ever thinking about what do I listen to, that solves that problem. Cool. Well, that mostly wraps up talking about working out in the winter and how we get through those things. So I've been cutting, and I want to talk about that for a bit. I've cut 300, 400 calories off my daily intake, and I feel like body fat is coming down. I've not done the measurements that I should be doing yet, so that will come in time. First thing first, the first thing that was important for me was to get my diet in check, make sure I was tracking everything, make sure my macros were good, and then I'll move to the actual measurement of things afterwards, make sure I'm feeling good first. I've just come off the back of quite a nasty cold, so getting over that is also a priority for me, and I wanted to keep working out wherever possible through that period, and just to make sure that I'm generally feeling better whilst working out. So that's been good. I am now eating what did I do for myself? A 40-40-20 split. So on the cut, I'm getting 40% protein, 40% carbs, 20% fat. The fat's nice and low in comparison to the other two because it's obviously quite calorically dense, is fat. So you need to sort of, a good way to cut calories on a diet is to bring the fat content down ever so slightly. You want to keep your protein nice and high if you're trying to hold on to this muscle mass, which obviously I am. I spent a year building it, so I don't want to lose any of that. And you want to keep your carbs relatively high, particularly on training days. Remember, carbs are your energy source. So if you have less carbs, or fewer carbs rather, you have less energy. So you want to keep your energy as high as possible. You will still have less energy than you would have had when you were bulking, purely because you're in a caloric deficit. However, you want to keep carbs as high as possible without sacrificing things like protein. You still need some fat. I think a no fat or really low fat diet is really bad for you, because particularly for holding on to muscle mass and things like that, dietary fat helps with hormone production like testosterone and things like that. So if you aren't eating enough fat, you're going to struggle to produce the hormones that your body needs in order to keep on muscle mass, and then that's going to sabotage things like your overall energy and well-being, which isn't going to help anyone. Ultimately, you need to still strike a balance between those things. But 20% of a diet that's roughly 2,800 calories a day at the moment for me will be doing that, which is great. So what do I eat most days? I try and eat a nice protein-heavy breakfast where I can. Generally, when I wake up, I've had 7 or 8 hours sleep, which means I've got a lot of space. In my stomach. I've spent all night digesting the last thing I ate, so it's probably 10 hours or so since I ate last, which is great. And if I can get a lot of protein in at that moment in time, my body's ready for it. So so this morning I had 4 eggs and 2 like bread roll type things, and I also had some low fat cheddar cheese. Low fat cheddar cheese is fantastic. So cheese itself is really fatty, but you can sort of get these 50% less fat ones in the supermarket, and the protein content in those is mad. You can also get, I think it's called lean cheese, which has got even less fat in it, and the protein content of that is also really, really good. I've found that's a great way to just bump up the protein content of something you're eating. Like if you want to grate that into an omelette or something, you can easily get, if you can get like 100 grams of it in without adding too many more calories, you can get a big bump of protein. So yeah, breakfast this morning, 4 eggs, so nice healthy fats and lots of protein, and some bread rolls and some cheddar cheese, which is what I had, and that was really nice. Really enjoyed that, and that came to about 90 grams of protein in total. That was a breakfast this morning. What other breakfasts have I had that have been quite good? Chicken sausages and turkey sausages can give you a lot of protein. You might have to eat quite a lot of them, but they're quite low in calories and quite high in protein, so they're really good. Egg whites also really, really good if you can buy the egg whites separately. If you want to make an omelette, for example, 4 egg whites and 2 whole eggs is a nice omelette and lots of protein in that. What else can you eat for breakfast that's got lots of protein? You can have a protein shake. Sometimes if you're not really feeling like eating something that's really dense in protein, what you can have is a protein shake with a couple of scoops of powder in it and something with carbs. So it's perfectly acceptable to have a big protein shake and some porridge, for example. I don't eat oats because I'm allergic to them, but I have had quinoa porridge this week, and I have had buckwheat porridge previously, and they're both fine. They're both great sources of carbs as well, and you have to keep you nice and full. You got to make sure your fiber content is relatively high, because when you're focusing on macronutrients, fiber can slip, and it's. I don't need to tell you what not getting enough fiber does to you, but it's unpleasant. So yeah, keep that nice and high. You'll feel better on it. You'll feel lighter, which is good. You also want to keep your eye on some micronutrients where possible. You can take a multivitamin. Some people recommend it just to insulate yourself from any deficiencies, but where you can, getting it from food is the best option. So if you're going to make yourself an omelette, you can chop mixed peppers into it. That's a really good one to do. Like bell peppers are just so stupidly high in vitamin C compared to the actual volume of them that they're a bit of a superfood, and they go really, really great with eggs. So they're a really good thing to add to an omelette. They will taste great, and they'll give you loads and loads of vitamin C, which will just get you really, keep your immune system firing. Other micronutrients you can get from lots of things. Make sure you're eating your vegetables. They're not great on most vegetables aren't great on macronutrients. Like if you're looking at carbs, things like broccoli are just quite low carb, so but they're also relatively low protein, and obviously low fat. So you're not going to choose them if you're trying to get a lot of carbs into a meal or a lot of protein into a meal. So they're easy to overlook, right? But they're full of really crucial micronutrients. So a general rule is to try and include a serving of fruit or vegetables with every meal that you have, and some snacks as well. Just because they aren't going to impact too heavily on your diet, but you will notice if they're not there, because you only have to become deficient in a few micronutrients before you really start feeling quite ropey. So yeah, they're really good. Get them in. They're not hard to eat either. They're easy to fit in with meals. Lunch for me, typically, because if I'm at work, it's got to be something relatively easy. So I like to batch cook my lunches early in the week. Sometimes I'll buy a big 1.5, 2 kilogram pack of chicken breast, and I will cook all of those at the same time, and then I'll package them into sort of 4 or 5 different containers, and I'll freeze a few, and then that forms part of a lunch for the week. So yeah, I'm quite, if it's a work lunch, I can be quite boring with it. I can have a few different types of chicken-based meals. So maybe a chicken curry one day, and then roast chicken and vegetables the next day, and alternate those two back and forth, and have rice with a curry and stuff like that. But typically you're trying to strike a balance between carbs, protein and fat for that meal, and also make sure it stores well, and make sure that it's easy to reheat and eat while you're at work. And that keeps you from getting really crap food when you're at work, and going out and getting chocolate bars, crisps, sandwiches and stuff like that, because it's really easy. It's easier to just reheat the lunch that you have, and you'll feel better, and you'll keep to your goals. And then dinner sort of varies based on what I've got on. If I'm doing anything musical in the evening, whether that be rehearsal or a live show, something like that, my dinner will be light, be really light compared to what I would normally have. So I will try, if it's a live show, particularly with the Iron Maiden stuff that I do, that's really energetic, and I'm going to need as much energy as possible. So that is a time when I have to make sure that I'm getting really dense sources of carbs that are going to digest fast enough for me to not have them sat in my stomach at sort of 8-9 o'clock when I'm expected to be on stage. They need to digest, but I also need the energy throughout the show. So typically that means I'll eat like rice or pasta, like white pasta, or potatoes, red potatoes, white potatoes, sometimes sweet potatoes, and do those in a variety of ways. So a particularly good way, if I'm feeling quite lazy, is to cut a potato into wedges, spray on some oil, just a light spray of oil, put them in the air fryer for 20-30 minutes, flipping around a bit, and then you've got some really nice tasty potato wedges that are actually really healthy for you, compared to ones you might buy pre-frozen or something like that. And they're really cheap, and they're really great sources of carbs, and you can eat loads because they're tasty. You can, if you can change dips and stuff, and you've got loads of choices with that. So they're very edible, even if you're not particularly feeling like eating, and some days I don't, then that's a great way to just get some food in. That can be really, really good for live shows. I also tend to take something for after the show, even if that's just a banana or an apple or something like that. Leave that in the car, and then I'll have that after the show just to try and replenish some of the lost carbohydrates that I'll have. Petrichor stuff the sets don't tend to be as long, so you don't tend to need as much energy, so you can sort of roll it back a bit. But the Iron Maiden stuff can be pretty intense. So it really does depend. I guess the takeaway message, it really does depend on what I'm doing. If it's energetic and I need energy, I need carbs. If it's not energetic, then and I just need to be light for the show, then I can have a lighter meal with fewer carbs, and then afterwards I can probably eat something. Sometimes in the past I have taken protein powder to shows that I've played, and then had that after the show, just as a way of making the meals work for that day. If I'm not performing, and I've got no plans, and I can just sort of have the evening off. I've been to the gym, done everything I need to do. I can have a slightly heavier meal, and that's when I like to get the protein and the carbs in via a food source rather than a supplement like whey protein. So I have been known in the past to eat sort of 500, 600 grams of chicken breast, which is a lot of chicken breasts, about 2.5, 3 chicken breasts in a meal, and that's cool. Sometimes that's great, and if I'm feeling really hungry, that's a really good way to get a load of protein in and feel pretty good afterwards on what I've eaten. One thing I quite like doing that's worked really well for me recently, I started to get really bored of just chicken breast that had been roasted and was a bit dry and not very nice. So one of the things that I've taken to doing is like coating that chicken breast in a southern fried breadcrumb, and then cooking it in the air fryer for about half an hour. And what you get is this sort of like coating on it, which initially tastes like southern fried chicken, which is obviously delicious. That's like a cheat meal, comfort food type feel. But then once you get through that really thin crust, which is, if you calculate the ingredients you use for it, it adds maybe, I guess, 50 calories per chicken breast, maybe a bit less than that. But once you actually get through that crust, you're just eating a chicken breast, but it makes all the difference to eating it. Like, I would generally struggle to eat a whole chicken breast or 1.5 chicken breasts if they were just roasted. Whereas if I've done this coating thing and I'm a bit hungry, putting away 3 is not a problem, which is great. It's great news. One of the things I've really noticed is that if you're not hacking your brain when it comes to food, And what I mean by that is things that hack your brain when it comes to food are like things that are really rich in sugar and rich in salt and fat together. So generally, if you think of like snack foods, crisps, chocolate and things like that, really dense sources of sugar, big dense sources of energy. They're not particularly nutritious, but they've got a load of like sugar in them, which just bypasses the part of your brain which should tell you to stop eating. So you can easily put away, like, I'm sure you've seen this before in your own behaviour, where you could eat like a bag of M&Ms, which is 900 to 1,000 calories, and then after that, you could eat some more. You know, you finished it, but you could eat some more. Whereas, if you tried to eat 700 calories of chicken breast, you'd feel really sick by the end of it, because your body would have got enough nutrition from it that it would be able to start sending you the hormones to tell you to stop eating, because you no longer need any more. And if you look into the like science behind why obesity is a problem now, but if you go back to the sort of 1920s, obesity was nowhere near as big a problem as it is today. There are lots of theories proposed as to why, like we have less energetic jobs and we are indoors more often, and video games stop kids from playing out when they're younger. So those like theories that of why they sound sort of sensible, but most of those have been debunked in the sense that if you actually measure the daily caloric spend of the average worker, it's very similar to what people actually would have burnt, you know, back when they were originally working in the 1920s and and before. If you look at how much kids play, again, very, very similar numbers. If you look at how much food we buy, it's very, very similar. But one thing that has massively changed since that period is the amount of food we buy that has a high sugar content. That is the biggest noticeable change in our diet and lifestyle. So that's heavily linked, and it does make sense to me. I mean, I've had lots of history of not eating particularly well, and when I can remember that often being linked with those particular types of food, which are very easy to eat a lot of, too much of, and your body just can't keep up, So, yeah, avoiding those foods where possible is going to be of the biggest benefit to you. Whole foods, I don't mean organic necessarily or things like that, but proper foods like whole vegetables. If it grew in the ground and then you're preparing it, that's good. Meat's great. Generally speaking, the more processing it's been through, the less nutritious it's going to be by the end of it, and so that's something to consider. But it doesn't have to be expensive. Potatoes are really cheap. Vegetables can be quite cheap. Cheaper cuts of meat are okay. Chicken thighs are great. Chicken legs are great. Chicken drumsticks, they're all cool. They're all much, much cheaper than a chicken breast. Beef, we tend to buy 5% fat minced beef. That's pretty nice, and it's not that expensive. We certainly don't, like, you see people on YouTube, like fitness bloggers and stuff, and they're telling you they eat like 3-4 steaks a week. We certainly don't. We couldn't afford that, really. So yeah, we eat a lot of chicken. We eat eggs. We eat loads of eggs. Eggs are nice and cheap. And we eat minced beef and a few other things here and there. But yeah, that's most of the diet. And then are there any exceptions to that? Cheat meals, I suggest we should talk about. I have allowed myself to have one cheat meal a month, and that's not a lot. a lot of people say, a lot of dietary advices suggests that you could get away with one cheat meal a week. A cheat meal is worth pointing out. That's not a whole day of rough eating. That is one meal where you just sort of don't worry about the calories. You have whatever you want, and then after that and before that, you get right back on it, you know? And I allow myself one of those that doesn't fit particularly well in the plan every month. I have it generally straight after payday, which is a nice, easy way of me remembering when it is. And I look forward to it. And it stops me, actually, if I plan that cheat meal in for payday, it stops me from ordering a pizza or something like that on a day when I'm not feeling as strong in the willpower department. Because I know that the pizza is coming in, well, for now, as I'm recording this on the 24th, it's coming in 3 days' time. I'm going to be able to have that cheat meal. So I'm not going to have a pizza today. And I'm not, I didn't have to order one last week and things like that, because I know when I'm going to be able to have one, I'm going to really look forward to it, and I'm going to accept it with no guilt and no shame, and I'm not going to feel like I've cheated on the diary, on my food diary or the diet or myself, because it's part of the plan, is the cheat meal, which is great. There is some evidence to suggest that it one like feast meal of way higher than the plan sort of replenishes glycogen and does all of those things. Whether it does or doesn't really matter. The fact is, it doesn't harm your overall goals necessarily, but also it helps you relieve a lot of that mental stress that would come from cheating on your diet. Having that there is really beneficial. I also recommend that people don't avoid their social commitments or obligations with friends and family. So, for example, if you've got a cheat meal plan for the 27th, and then your whole family says, oh, we're all going out for a meal together on the 18th, you should go to the meal, have fun, have a good time, eat something nice, eat what you want. You don't have to go crazy if you feel really like you need to stay in control, but you can have whatever you want, because those events are important. You shouldn't miss out on those just because you're living a more disciplined life. And so yeah, that's the diet for me at the moment. It's going well. I'm eating, really well. I think my clothes are looser. It's slightly hard to focus on that sort of stuff because I've got a lot of sort of different items of clothing, like t-shirts and stuff, and they're all a slightly different fit. So it's really hard for me to tell if I've sort of lost weight or if I've just got one of the different t-shirts that's a better fit on. I certainly feel like I've got more muscle definition in places, which is great. And I feel really good sort of mental health wise because I've been able to get into the gym, work out and get through those tough sessions without feeling like I've lost out. So I started to feel like I was getting weaker every sort of week, and I sort of have been able to turn that round, and I've been having some really good sessions lately where I felt very, very strong. The main difference I've noticed is in energy, because I'm cutting, I just don't have as much. So even though I may find myself capable of lifting the same amount as I previously have done when I've been eating loads, sometimes the rest, like the reps just aren't there. And that's okay. That's fine. That's just part of cutting, right? So what I've generally been doing is when I can't continue in terms of reps, I stop, have a short break in terms of, a minute or 2, 3 minutes maybe, just a rest, and then I go again until I can't do it. And then, I keep lifting those weights to make sure I can maintain that muscle, but also I make sure that I'm just working That's the hard part, right? So anything that you do exercise-wise is burning calories. And just showing up and sweating and working hard and getting out of breath, that's burning calories every single time you do that. Whether your numbers go up or they don't, you are going to be, building on that foundation. So I'm keeping that in mind. I'm showing up. I'm working hard. And it's been brilliant. And I'm going to keep doing that. I will probably be cutting until, I think, February. I think I might stop in February and sit at maintenance for a while and see how that feels. But at least until February, I'm going to be on a slightly reduced diet, bring down my body fat, and then maintain as much muscle as possible. All right. I'd love to hear what your plans are for the winter. So, obviously, you need to start thinking about goals for 2020, and I'd love to hear what they are. I'd also love to hear how you've done this year in terms of fitness goals. What have you tried to achieve this year, and what have you achieved? And if they're not the same thing, that's okay. It's still important to look back and see what you've managed to do. So, get in touch with me on Facebook at the Hella Weights Podcast or the Hella Weights Community, on Twitter at @Stormbeard, or on Instagram at _Stormbeard, and tell me how you've been doing, because I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, stay strong and stay heavy.
Truth